Another multi-day tornado risk begins today, and almost 40 million Americans are within risk zones. And on top of that, long-range models continue to hint that we might be seeing more severe weather ramp up starting this Sunday and going through the first week of July. A lot of instability is brewing in the Central Plains today, and this is going to bring the potential for giant hail and a couple tornadoes. Meanwhile, tomorrow's severe weather setup is going to bring the risk for a couple strong tornadoes back to Kansas and Oklahoma. I'm going to break down everything that you need to know so that you can stay safe and stay weather aware over the next 2 days and even into next week. So let's get right into the forecast. Jumping right into our day one categorical outlook, we do have a slight 2 out of 5 risk that I wanted to highlight in northern Utah, where we're going to have the risk, especially for some wind damage. But then the meat and potatoes of our main event here is going to be out towards Denver, Cheyenne, and other areas all the way from Lubbock, Texas, and up into Wyoming. So we're going to be expecting all hazards of severe weather there. But there is a third area that can't be slept on, which is out in the Midwest and into Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois, where we do have a more conditional risk for tornadoes and really all hazards of severe weather, especially in Wisconsin. Looking at our tornado probabilities, we do have this 2% zone in the Midwest throughout Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and the easternmost part of Iowa. But again, our main event is going to be out in the Central Plains, where we have a 5% risk that you see there in brown near Denver. So that's going to be for southeastern Wyoming into western Nebraska and northeastern Colorado for today. Looking at our wind probabilities for today, we do have a 5% region all the way from Chicago and close towards Minneapolis. But then we have this SIG 1 region outlined all the way from southern New Mexico in the Texas Panhandle through eastern Wyoming and even clipping the Badlands of South Dakota. So this is going to be a more expansive region where we could see some widespread wind damage associated with these thunderstorms this evening. And again, we also have this wind risk in northern Utah for a 15% region as well. That's going to be the main hazard associated with those storms. Our hail risk today actually might be the most significant. We do have a 5% region, more conditional again in the Midwest, and a 5% that's going to stretch all the way throughout southeastern New Mexico and then up through the Nebraska Panhandle into the southern high plains. But where you see this SIG 2 region, this double hatched area that I just circled just northeast of Denver, that is our most significant concern for possible tennis ball or even larger hail falling out of the sky throughout areas northeast of Denver and near Cheyenne, Wyoming, into portions of eastern Wyoming and the Nebraska Panhandle. So that's going to be a pretty significant concern for today. Looking at tomorrow's risk for severe weather, we do have a marginal 1 out of 5 risk in the mid-Atlantic all the way up through Pennsylvania and even clipping New York, also including Ohio, West Virginia, and Maryland. But our main event is going to be again out in the central United States, all the way from Illinois and Missouri back through Texas, Oklahoma, and into the Central Plains through Colorado and even the southern high plains into eastern Wyoming. So a very, very large region where we could see severe weather tomorrow, and that is going to include that yellow 2 out of 5 slight risk that you're seeing in the middle of the map, all the way from southwest Missouri back through the Oklahoma Panhandle and then up north through eastern Wyoming. Tomorrow's tornado risk is slightly greater than today's, in my opinion. We do have a 2% region already outlined from the Panhandles all the way through southwestern Missouri. And then we have this 5% in SIG 1 region that encompasses northern Oklahoma and southern Kansas. That's the area where we could see multiple strong tornadoes tomorrow, so definitely something you need to pay attention to on your Thursday. Looking at tomorrow's wind risk, that's what's going to include that area I mentioned before through Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and even into southwestern New York, as those storms just have a little bit of a wind threat associated with them. We do have another 5% region that's going to encompass a large portion of the central United States yet again, with a 15% region there as well, all the way from the Ozarks back through the Oklahoma Panhandle, and then up north again into eastern Wyoming, very similar to today. And then finally, looking at tomorrow's hail risk, we do have a similar region outlined for tomorrow, which is going to stretch all the way from southwestern Missouri through the Oklahoma Panhandle and then back up into the high plains all the way into Montana. But our 15% region is going to clip southeastern Colorado and then stretch pretty much east to west back through the Oklahoma Panhandles and towards Springfield or Branson, Missouri. Looking ahead to Friday, things are definitely going to calm down a little bit, but we do still have a 1 out of 5 marginal risk all the way from southwest Missouri back through the Oklahoma Panhandles and then jumping all the way north into the northern plains, clipping Montana and North Dakota. But we're not expecting any type of a severe weather outbreak on Friday. Things will be a little bit more tame. Finally, taking a look forward into this weekend, this is for Saturday, as we have a 15% risk from South Dakota into North Dakota in the northern plains here. This is also going to potentially clip eastern Montana. Taking a look at the timing of our severe weather today, we do have some thunderstorms ongoing in Kansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Mississippi, and then in the Midwest near Lake Michigan and Wisconsin. All of that is going to pave the way for things to move off to the east. Now, we could see a little bit of re-intensification early this afternoon near eastern Oklahoma. where these storms could produce some gusty winds, but we're not expecting anything severe. And we could also see some more thunderstorms develop throughout Illinois and central Missouri, but we're not expecting anything there to be too severe as well. Storms will continue to push east through Michigan and Chicago this afternoon. All of that is going to pave the way for our afternoon and early evening storms to start firing off. This is by 8 p.m., so getting into the early evening hours here. We have some semi-discrete cells all the way from near Odessa and then back into Wyoming and the Nebraska Panhandle, where our main area of concern is going to be in this secondary pink circle I just added near the Nebraska Panhandle into northeastern Colorado. And then as we get later into the evening by 9, 10, 11, and then midnight tonight, things are going to become a little bit more of a cluster in areas like Amarillo and then back through northern Kansas, southern Nebraska, and eastern Colorado, where the severe weather risk is still going to be there, but it will be mitigated at least a little bit. As we roll forward into Thursday, we are expecting these storms to continue to push off to the east, possibly a little line that forms between Arkansas and Kansas in the early morning hours. This is by the early afternoon now on Thursday. So 3 p.m., we've got some storms all throughout the Northeast, another cluster in Kansas, Missouri, and northeastern Oklahoma, and then some more storms ongoing near the Nebraska Panhandle into Wyoming. All of this is going to pave the way for that severe weather threat to really ramp up in the evening. By 6 p.m., you can see some of these semi-discrete supercells firing off in northern Texas. Also a line of thunderstorms that could produce damaging winds in Wyoming, Nebraska, and Colorado. And as we get into the early evening hours and into the later evening hours here on Thursday, that tornado risk is probably going to ramp up when we have any of this semi-discrete convection ongoing. So this is by 10 p.m. on Thursday. The timing of this is still a little bit uncertain, but at least the 6Z HER from this morning is still showing that we might see these storms around 10 p.m. We could see them a little earlier than that, though. These storms are going to bring that greatest risk for strong tornadoes throughout northern Oklahoma and southern Kansas Thursday evening. Looking at our surface moisture and wind, we are going to get a little bit of moisture return into Oklahoma and Kansas, which might be a little bit of a foreshadowing for tomorrow's event. So make sure that you tune in for tomorrow's forecast, as I'll be covering in detail all the meteorology behind that as well. But for today, we are seeing some decent moisture really in eastern Colorado, western Kansas, and near the Nebraska Panhandle. And especially into this Nebraska Panhandle region up here is honestly my greatest concern for a tornado threat today. One of the reasons for that is going to be the clouds breaking up during peak heating hours. You're going to see by 3 p.m. here on Wednesday, eastern Colorado, western Kansas, all those clouds are breaking up. And then into the early evening, you can see some of them breaking up just a little bit in the Nebraska Panhandle as well. So that's going to definitely elevate our risk for getting severe weather in terms of more sunlight, creating more buoyancy and more instability in the atmosphere. Looking at our 500 millibar winds, this is going to show us divergence and inevitably rising motion in the atmosphere. You can see by 6 p.m., especially in Nebraska, you've really got that upper level support. So again, in the Nebraska Panhandle region and the far northeastern corner of Colorado, that is where my greatest concern lies for the tornado threat this evening. Looking at our 850 millibar vorticity, this is just how much spin is available at one of our lower levels of the atmosphere. By 9 p.m., as the introduction of the low-level jet starts to happen, some of these values are really going to ramp up. So the severe weather threat and the tornado threat is not going to end at sunset. It's probably going to roll through around 10 to 11 p.m. tonight, maybe even to midnight, as you see in southern Nebraska and even western Kansas, eastern and northeastern Colorado. Some of those values are still definitely there. So any storms that exist could ingest some of that spin and really get themselves going to try and produce a tornado or some large to very large hail. I did want to show one of our possible fail modes for a tornado threat today, and that is associated with our LCL heights. By 7 p.m. here, you can see these very low values in the Nebraska Panhandle. So that's where our most favorable region is. But throughout eastern Colorado, these yellows and oranges are not quite as good. So what we're looking at here is how tall is the cloud deck, essentially. So the lower the cloud deck, the easier it is for a rotating updraft to connect to the surface and generate a tornado. So in this case, we have pretty favorable conditions in the Nebraska Panhandle and even into northeastern Colorado. But these LCLs are a little bit elevated in portions of Kansas, Colorado, and that is going to limit our tornado threat in those areas today. Taking a look at our instability throughout the afternoon, we are going to see it really ramp up in Colorado, Nebraska, and Kansas, as well as back towards Wisconsin. And again, there is a risk for severe weather out in Wisconsin tonight. The Storm Prediction Center, while I'm filming this, has upgraded that region to a slight 2 out of 5 risk now. But in general, we are going to watch these values throughout the evening start to fall a little bit in that area. So not the most robust severe weather possible event going on in Wisconsin, but all hazards are still on the table with any convection. Throughout the evening, still by 8 p.m., plenty of CAPE to work with out in our main area of concern towards Colorado, Nebraska, and Kansas. And then finally, looking at our storm relative helicity from 0 to 3 kilometers, this is just kind of how much spin is available to be ingested into an updraft. By 7 p.m., again, this Nebraska Panhandle region still continues to look concerning. But I did want to point out that out in Wisconsin, some of these values do start to spike up just a little bit. So it's definitely a secondary target that can't be ignored for the potential risk for an isolated tornado in the Midwest. But our main concern is definitely going to be in Nebraska, Colorado, and northwestern Kansas today. Another thing worth considering is that we do have plenty of shear all the way from New Mexico back into Texas as well, even into the Oklahoma Panhandle. So again, any of these storms that can remain semi-discrete and get themselves going could pose the risk for an isolated tornado. I'm just not quite as concerned with that far south. Those are going to be more of wind producers. I did want to really quickly show in the top left of your screen, you will see the updated outlook from the Storm Prediction Center with that 2 out of 5 slight risk that was introduced in Wisconsin in the Midwest. But that's going to bring us to the end of today's forecast. We will be broadcasting tonight, so make sure you have notifications turned on for that. Thank you so much for tuning in today and choosing WillBrattonWx as your source of weather information throughout the entire United States. Stay safe out there, and we will see you soon.